How's it going, Mets and overall baseball fans? Welcome back for the latest live show here on YouTube and, of course, wherever you get your audio podcast. This is episode 31, the Piazza episode of Bleav in Queens. Myself, Joe Sobralo, and Anthony Recker. We're going to be breaking down all the latest in Metsland, our first official show this offseason, headlined by Edwin Diaz signing a record-breaking contract. We're going to be sharing our raw reactions to that and whatever else news and rumors-wise has been out there to this point, along with breaking down a stay or go segment regarding all the key Mets free agents out there at the time of recording this. But before we get into all, I have to let you all know that today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting needs, so make sure you head over to BetOnline's at AG using promo code Bleav at BLEAV, so that way you get your 50% off welcome bonus. BetOnline, it's where the games begin. And now, folks, let's let the show begin. How's it going, fellas? We weren't here last week, so this feels long overdue. I'm happy to be back.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I missed you guys. Rec, you look great. That post-workout glow is really doing you justice.
Just got out of the gym. You gotta get in when you can. I worked all day, had a show tonight, just put the little guy down, got in the quick lift, and
look at you, man. You're like Superman over there. You're gonna Clark Kent us or what?
I mean, no, because you don't want to see what's under this. It's not as good as it used to be, but that's for another day. I'm trying to get back there. Let's put it that way.
Before we get into it, I want to ask Rec, because you on MLB Tonight yesterday, speaking of Diaz and his signing, there was one specific clip that I'm glad my brother first noticed, and you were discussing, Diaz coming back from his poor start with the Mets to now really getting into his zone and just getting ready to shove it up right the butt. So my first raw reaction to that was, Bleav in Queens, this podcast is wearing off. It's clearly showing now when you're on television. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I almost said ass. I did. I was like, you just shove it up your. I can't say that. Okay.
Do they have live bleepers for MLB Network or no? If it happens, it happens, right? No.
I mean, yeah. If it happens, it happens. I'm going to say that I'm not at the point where I can do that and actually get away with it. Like, if I did that, thanks for coming, Rec. All right, we'll see you again. No, the guy's never coming back. So yeah, I can't really do that. I had to cover my tracks very quickly there with the old booty. But
nice save. Very fitting.
I know I had to try to pull something out of my ass somehow, so I did.
Okay, it was a great segment. We absolutely loved it, as did everyone on Twitter.
So, Diaz is the man.
Diaz is a man, but speaking about pulling things out of your ass, Rec, I just want to hear from you right away. Let me hear your raw thoughts that you're pulling out there regarding Edwin Diaz and this record-breaking deal. 5 years, $102 million, has an opt-out after that third year, or has potential to be a 6-year deal should the Mets want to have it be a 6-year, $122 million. So, one, my first question is, are you surprised by how quick the Mets were able to get this done before free agency really even begins? And two, what are your expectations for Diaz now signing this record-breaking contract?
I'm not surprised they got it done. This was their priority number one. They made it a priority. And look, if there's one thing I think we're learning and that we're going to continue to learn is that when Steve Cohen makes someone a priority, he gets it done. Lindor, they didn't want to give $341 million to Lindor, but it was Cohen's priority to make that happen. And he made it happen before spring training ended 2 years ago and said, that's it. This is happening. I don't care how much it takes. You want $1 million more than Tatis? Here you go. There it is. So no, doesn't surprise me at all. Diaz, look, he's been one of the best closers in baseball for the last several years. If you can make an argument that he is the best, especially this past year. Guys like Emmanuel Clase would be in that same air, but it's just fantastic. And when you have someone like that, I mean, what are you gonna do? You gonna let him go? You gonna let him walk and go somewhere else and then shove it up your ass? I mean, I don't think so. So realistically, when you're looking at what else is out there anyway, I mean, they would have to trade for a closer if they wanted one, or a guy. I don't want to call it a closer because I don't think they have to pitch the ninth inning anymore, but they would have to trade for a reliever of his talent, and there's nobody out there on the free agent market that's even close. I mean, you're looking at Kenley Jansen and Craig Kimbrell again are the best two options, and I don't think anyone's going down that road thinking that they're anywhere near the limit or the talent level of where Edwin Diaz is right now. So their only option really was to sign him back because they have to remake that entire bullpen. I mean, they're losing a lot of pieces. We're going to talk about several more of them, I'm sure, as we go along here. And if you didn't have him, where would you start? So he was priority number one. They had to get it done. They got it done. They're moving on to the next one, whether that's Nimmo, deGrom, whoever it may be. We'll find out. But when they make someone a priority, they get it done.
All right, what about you, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, to Rex's point, Steve Cohen's going to get whoever he wants, right? I mean, this was a no-brainer. The only thing that shocked me was how quickly the deal was done. I mean, yesterday, Sunday afternoon, the day after, not even a full 24 hours after the World Series ends, I did not expect to see the Diaz deal done. But the number is exactly what I thought. 5 years, $100 million. He wanted the $100 million deal, the first one ever for a reliever. Frankly, the way he pitched this year, he deserved it. I mean, don't forget, 2 out of the last 3 seasons, he's probably been unequivocally the best closer in the National League. This year, I'd say the best in baseball. But 2020, shortened season, only had 6 saves because the team stunk, but he was dominant in 2020. And this year, dominant throughout the full season. He went from June 18th until, when was it? Like early September without giving up a run. I Bleav it was a Phillies game. It might have been the Jose Budo game. That was like the first run he gave up since June 18th.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Yeah.
So late August. So he went over 2 months, 2 calendar months without allowing a single run. I mean, he had a ridiculous season. Rec, to your point, they have to remake the entire bullpen. I mean, who's coming back? Drew Smith? I think he's due for arbitration. Adonis Medina, I think, is still under contract. Isn't that it? I mean, Lugo's a free agent. Ottavino's a free agent. They have to redo this entire bullpen, and to have, whether it's the 9th inning or the 8th inning, whenever the other team's heart of the order is coming up, to have that guy, your number 1 reliever, locked up, it's going to do them well moving forward. Now they can prioritize, Jake, Nimmo, the rest of the bullpen, Trey Turner possibly, Aaron Judge possibly, but Diaz was, I think, the top priority on my list, on Steve Cohen's list, obviously. So it was a great deal.
Yeah, my initial takeaways were, and I discussed this a lot because I went live yesterday on the channel when the news first came out, but in a nutshell, it's great to see Edwin Diaz not even give the thought of entertaining opposing clubs here, right? You see the commitment, you see how much he has enjoyed New York, and I think the biggest story when it comes to Edwin is just a guy that you point out greatly, Rec, on MLB Tonight last night, but point is that he's a guy that first came into Queens with all this pressure on his shoulders right away from the fan base, not happy about what we were seeing in that deal originally, thinking, oh, Jared Kelenick's the best player imaginable since Mike Trout. Now that, of course, hasn't panned out to that ability at all yet, but there was a lot of pressure on Edwin from the get-go, and for him to be as Jekyll and Hyde was what he was for the entire 2019 campaign. I mean, his control wasn't there if he didn't have his slider, you're sitting fastball, and if he didn't have his fastball, you're sitting slider, if he's even able to command the zone, and to do that in a big market, to get shelled the way he did for the majority of that season, to come back and really not only win over the fan base, but simply be the best, most dominant reliever out there. When you're looking at pure stuff, there's no one better, you could rightfully argue, than Edwin Diaz. So I'm just so happy for his family and for himself. Of course, he deserves this. And yes, there's always risk when you're shelling out this type of dough for a reliever. That's why this is a record-breaking contract. This never happens. You're never going to see $100 million commonly, at least for relievers of Edwin Diaz's type. But now in doing so, he sets the market. So I'm very interested to see what's going to happen for the remainder of the relievers out there. I'm sure that they were all just with big grins on their face as soon as they saw that deal come to fruition, because now you're looking at, guys that we'll discuss further in the offseason, but Andrew Chafin, Robert Suarez, David Robertson, Kenley Jansen, so many really solid arms out there that are going to be looking for the bag, and rightfully so, because the market is now in their favor. But biggest thing, again, for Edwin is he was someone that faced endless adversity when he first came here in the biggest market, and overcome that in New York is not an easy thing. And that kind of just tells you what us Mets fans should be expecting the years going forward. I mean, he very well could be the most dominant closer that baseball has seen in New York since a guy like Mariano Rivera. That's what we're dealing with when it comes to Edwin Diaz. So I'm very excited for what his future holds. But I think that's all that really needs to be said on Edwin. He felt like that one certainty. Out of all the free agents, there was one guy who I didn't even think for a second would be going elsewhere, and that truly was Edwin Diaz. So I'm very happy this deal got done. Mets have a minimum of 3 to 5 or even 6 years more with Edwin Diaz. Cue those trumpets, baby. As I see you have the nice plug, Joe, with the trumpet shirt. Make sure to check it out, shop.Bleav.com. I had some people tagging me on Twitter as well, repping the shirt right as the signing happens. So shout out to you guys. You know who you are. And also shout out to everyone in the live show. We may get to some comments before the end of the live show, but we have a lot of topics to get into. So now let's pivot. I just want to give everyone a quick update. I want to hear your raw thoughts. It's early in the offseason. Free agency hasn't officially begun, but we do know that the Mets have made some moves to this point, including bringing back Daniel Vogelbach on his contract, a $1.5 million deal. Now, of course, this does not guarantee anything for Vogie and what his future is going to be with the Mets, but it does help them avoid arbitration in doing so. So it was pretty much a no-brainer for a guy who had an 830 OPS for the Mets when he was acquired from the Pittsburgh Pirates, all things considered. And outside of that, the other big news that came out today, and again, this is just one of endless free agents that will be linked to the Mets that we discussed earlier in our group chat, is Trea Turner. Now, whether Trea Turner is simply just a pipe dream or someone that can actually become a reality, there's no denying that if there is substance to this, then Mets fans have all the right in the world to be excited. So starting with you, Rec, what is your initial impressions? Do you think that there's any chance that someone like Trea Turner could find himself landing in Queens? Or do you think that this is as simple as, hey, you know, the Mets would love this guy, but the reality is they just simply won't be able to afford him?
I think the reality is every team would love this guy. He is maybe the most dynamic shortstop in the game. And I mean that with all due respect to many of the shortstops in the game that are great at what they do. But this guy is maybe the best athlete I've ever seen on a baseball field. I can remember playing against him in 2016 AAA, and then again in the big leagues same year. I honestly thought he might be the best player I'd ever seen. I remember he hit a line drive down the third. We were in AAA. Gwinnett hits a line drive down the third base line. He gets to, he took off out of the box, and I'm like, oh, okay, this guy can move. He ends up on third base for a triple, and he gets there, slides in, and I'm talking like he's in easy. A line drive down the left field line, triple, sliding to third base, no problem. Later in the game, pops one out to left center, deep, and I'm thinking, this guy's got speed. He's got power. He obviously can run. At the time he was a shortstop. He ended up moving out to the outfield when I played against him later that year with the Nationals. He's playing center field. He could do everything. Anything you could think of, everything. He's stealing bases. He's a nightmare to play against, to try to call a game against. So I thought this kid was just unbelievable. And so, yeah, every team would love to have this guy. And I think you're not doing your due diligence if you're not at least checking in with his agent. And then as soon as that happens, the agent's going to go to, whatever writer. Yeah, this team called, this team called, this team called. Why are they going to do that? Well, that makes everybody think the price is going up. The price is going up.
Especially when it's connected with Steve Cohen's Mets.
Yeah, exactly. And every big free agent is going to be connected with this team, because realistically, if you get a call from the Mets saying, hey, what's up with Trea? Like, what's he looking for? How's, keep us in the loop on anything going on with Trea, which most teams are going to say. As soon as a writer gets a hold of that, they're going to report, or the agent's going to tell the writer, because if the Mets are involved, price goes up. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. That's just the way it's going to be. You're going to hear every big free agent linked to the Mets at some point. They're going to check in with them, which is what they should do. And these agents are going to do their job. The writers are going to do their job, and you're going to hear about it. I don't think it's going to happen. For him to come here, he has to either play outfield. I don't think he'll play second or third. I just don't think that would be like a slap in the face to someone as athletic as he is. So look, if you're looking for a center fielder, you want to throw him out there in center field, I get it, and he'd be great. But I don't think they need to spend that kind of money on a guy like that, because they have other holes that they need to fill. You fill that hole, how much is left to go around? I don't know. I don't know how deep Steve's pockets are this year. I don't know what he wants to do, but I would say you're probably kissing Jacob deGrom goodbye, which, whatever. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. But I think he ends up somewhere else. I actually really like his fit in Philadelphia. As scary
me too,
as
and that pisses me off greatly.
They need a shortstop. They just declined Segura's option for $17 million. Zach Eflin declined his own option for $15 million. Okay, Zach.
Can we talk about that for like just a hot second? What?
It sounds like someone who's still upset they lost the World Series.
Like, what? You weren't even in the postseason rotation. Like, what?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think from what I saw of him, if I'm an opposing GM, and this is we're getting off track here, but if I'm an opposing GM, I go up to Zach this offseason and I say, dude, I loved your stuff out of the bullpen. We will bring you on as a reliever. If we need you to start, he can be that kind of swing guy that can go back and forth. If we need you to start, maybe we'll make some starts, but we love you as a reliever. You could be a high leverage guy. He had nasty movement. The slider looked better. The sinker looked better, a little bit more velocity. He looked really good out of the bullpen, like seriously. So
but my thing is, you're not going to get a 15 mil AAV to be a reliever.
No, but I think the idea is hopefully you get maybe, because of your track record as a starter, maybe you get something in between, a decent reliever, which, 7-8 million. And then obviously your average starter is making 15 to 20 million if you're in free agency. So somewhere in the middle there, say it's 12 million a year, and then you multiply that by, I don't know, 3 years, you're getting 36 instead of 15 is the idea. I get it though. 15 million for 1 year. I mean, wow. Anyway, we got off track. What were we talking about before that?
Okay, well, I wanted to stay just for another second here on the Trea Turner topic because, Joe, I want to hear your thoughts about it because for me, now, of course, anything's possible with Steve Cohen. I think that's something that really needs to be emphasized. There's still people out there that somehow doubt this man with his abilities. And again, of course, he's going to have a limit at some point. To what degree, we're going to find out as the offseason goes on. But speaking of Trea Turner, why he's so appealing for the Mets, aside just being, a great hitter, is and his on-base ability is the fact that he has this great versatility. So in the hypothetical where you would say heavily pursue him, that would likely mean that Brandon Nimmo would be parted with. So panning to you, Joe, what's your thoughts on if the Mets, do you think that they should really go all in on this guy and potentially make him their center fielder if that would mean the demise of Brandon Nimmo? Or do you think that they should stay heavily focused on really keeping Brandon and just rounding out this roster and not fully running it back in 2023, but not having a drastic difference in what the lineup configuration is bound to look like?
It's actually a much tougher call for me than I think it would be for most people. And
Yeah.
I'm really trying to take emotion out of the equation. I'll admit, I love Brandon Nimmo. I want Brandon Nimmo to be a career Met. So it's hard to take emotion out of the equation on this one. But looking at Trea Turner and how he would fit on this team, not going to be your shortstop, just not going to happen. Rec, you don't seem to like the idea of him at second base. So center field would be the obvious. Now, in my dream scenario, he's playing third base. But I don't know if he has any experience at third base at the big league level. So looking at him in center field, and again, I'm trying to do this completely objectively. I think you're losing a little something defensively. Yes, he's got slightly better speed than Brandon Nimmo. I mean, Nimmo's speed this year was really at an elite level. And I thought Brandon Nimmo, when I saw he was not a Gold Glove finalist at the end of the year, I was actually shocked. I thought he played a Gold Glove caliber center field. Look at the play he made, Jake against the Dodgers, robbing that JT homer.
It's the same reason why Juan Soto was a finalist.
Yeah, the guy with negative 14
exactly,
defensive runs
right.
allowed. Yeah.
Exactly.
But so, I think you definitely would lose something defensively. You're getting arguably the fastest guy in the game. That's always a plus. You're getting someone who, I love Nimmo. Trea Turner's a better hitter than Nimmo, has a little more pop, higher average guy, but lower OBP guy. And Brandon Nimmo, the way he fit in this lineup so well, when the Mets had success, it was when they were chasing starters early, running up, 20, 25 pitch counts in the first inning. Nimmo was crucial in that. And Turner doesn't see as many pitches as Nimmo. Again, I'm not trying to, Billy Bean this and sound cheap, but the truth is, like, Brandon Nimmo really fit into this lineup. I don't know if Turner defensively or with, the whole formula for the Mets' success this year is as good of a fit as Brandon Nimmo. So I actually struggle with this call. I wouldn't be complaining if we got Trea Turner. The guy's a game changer. He's a dynamic athlete. He's an absolute freak. But I think Nimmo is just a really great fit on this team. And I loved everything we saw out of Nimmo this year. It was by far a career year for him. Even when he went through slumps, I mean, even if he wasn't getting base knocks, he was still working pitch counts, still helping the team, great in the field. I struggle with the idea of not seeing him in center field.
So one last thing, and this can be for you, Rec. What importance do you think has when it comes to the base stealing ability? Because that was something that the Mets definitely struggled with throughout the year. Starling Marte wasn't able to be as dynamic as what they were hoping for, especially with his age. He's having constant ailments. That's something that's going to continue. As we know, he had surgery on, I believe it was some type of muscle. He'll be fine for spring training, however, but he's a guy that is only going to slow down as he gets older. And then same thing can be said here when you look at Brandon Nimmo. The reason why Brandon Nimmo doesn't run is when he finally started to steal back bags towards the end of the year, he tweaked himself, had a slight injury, and reminds me a little bit of Byron Buxton. Byron, when he first came out in the league, was, again, one of the fastest players out there, one of the most dynamic, but he went from being, a stolen base machine to a guy where the Twins barely want this guy to run the bases because they know that he's injury prone. Now, with Trea Turner had roughly 30 stolen bases. Now, next year, there's more than likely going to be a large increase in stolen bags because pitchers can only throw to first twice, and then from there, you're going to have a large lead. Bases are enlarged as well, so that's going to benefit the runner as well, trying to get that tag in. So do you think that these are something that the Mets are putting into play here with not only getting a great all-around player, but again, someone that can bring that dynamic that the Mets don't have as much right now when it comes to stealing bags?
I don't think you need to prioritize stealing bases, but it depends on what your team is. If this lineup is anything like what it was last year, yes, they're going to need to steal bags because they're a base-to-base team. If they can hit home runs, they don't need to do that. Look, you get a guy like Trea Turner, he does both. Yay, you get to do both of those things, and that's fantastic. I think you're going to need to, and this front office is going to have to figure it out quickly. What are we going to be next year? Who are we going after? Can we make a few moves that really enhance our ability to hit the ball out of the ballpark, and then decide what kind of team you're going to be from there? So I looked to this team. They're losing a lot of talent right now. They have a lot of guys coming off the books right now, mostly out of the bullpen, but some starters, and they're going to need to replenish this roster. So I look at this front office as probably having quite a good amount of work to do early in this offseason, because if they don't and they wait, it's not that they might not get their guy, but they might not be able to put together the roster the way that they want to. They may not be able to make it fit. They may get stuck with the team with a hole or two that they have to try to fill later, which is, kind of what happened last year. So I look to see them being active early to figure that out. But to answer your question, they don't need to. They don't need to prioritize stealing bases. But again, they better prioritize hitting some home runs then. Keep the ability to hit the ball, keep the ball in play, put the ball in play, not strike out a ton, but you got to get some guys that can pop.
And as excited as I am to talk about a lot of these external options, but that's meant for further podcasts because the Mets, as we stand right now, have 12 key free agents that we don't know if they're going to be staying or leaving. So let's pan into now the Stay or Go segment here of the pod. And Joe, starting with you, I guess, how do you guys want to go about this? Should I just list all 12 or should we go player by player?
One at a time. Yeah,
one at
a time. And
okay. All right. Well, I don't want to start with Jake. We'll get to Jake. He's the juicy one. Let's start with, again, the guy we were just discussing. How about that in Brandon Nimmo? Joe, starting with you, do you think he's going to stay in Queens or do you think he's going to be parted with?
I think he's back. I think the Mets are going to pay him more than they plan to, maybe more than, they should. But I think Nimmo's back. And, I know a lot of people are looking at the Rockies right now, and the Rockies are reportedly going to come in with a ridiculous offer. I don't know if Nimmo wants to go there. Even if he takes a little bit of a pay cut, I mean, come on, the guy still drives, a 2011 Altima? I think he'll take a small pay cut to remain a Met because I think Nimmo is one of the few guys in pro sports who is super loyal, loves this organization. I think he's grateful for this organization. He was there. He's been here, 11 years? He was drafted 2011. He's been there for the best of the best and the worst of the worst. And I think he knows the direction that they're headed in, knows that we have something special brewing. I think Nimmo comes back. I think the two sides agree to a fair deal. And he's so important to this lineup. All the reasons I just listed. I mean, who would have thought I'd have an internal debate of Brandon Nimmo versus Trea Turner?
Right.
I think bring him back.
What about you, Rick?
He stays, and the reason he stays is simple. Who takes his place? Who's their center fielder next year if they don't bring him back? Because I don't think it's Trea Turner.
Vogel.
And so who's out there?
Throw Vogel back out there.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. This front office is smart enough to know there aren't any other center fielders with his talent level in this free agent class. And I truly believe Trea Turner wants to play short. So he's going to make that a priority in where he signs. And so he's off the board. That means Brandon Nimmo's your center fielder. And that's just, there's no other way to put it. Now, look, that doesn't mean that other teams aren't going to see it the same way. And he's not going to be very valuable this offseason because I think a lot of teams understand how valuable a guy like he can be. And realistically, yes, Colorado could want to pay him a ton. Maybe he wants to go back towards home, live, play in Colorado, not too far from Wyoming, and I don't know, but I just see the Mets, making him one of their. They said he's one of our priorities too. They would probably prioritize Diaz and Nimmo before deGrom, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys hit the nail on the head. I don't really need to add anything there. I would just like to make note, though, that it came out earlier today through a report from the New York Post that the Mets, of what we know to this point, really haven't had apparently much contact with Nimmo since the end of the season. Now, my raw reaction is I'm not surprised by that. Again, he's presented by Scott Boras. That's something that Boras tends to do. He wants to try to drag things out for Nimmo and have as many options as possible, get the best bag possible, and rightfully so in Brandon's case. But regardless of all that, I fully expect Brandon Nimmo to return. We've seen numerous reports already that the Mets have him at the tippity top of their priority list, including Edwin Diaz. Diaz was the first domino to fall. I have a very strong feeling that Brandon Nimmo, Trey Turner, and other player rumors aside, will in fact be next to stay in Queens on potentially a 6-7 year deal. Hoping more so in that 6 range, but I know that market value wise, he's probably looking north of 7 because this is in fact his big payday. But let's shift now from Brandon Nimmo. Let's get into some lesser guys, not in the sense of that they're bad players or anything, but before we get into more of the top guys on the list. And let's go to the bullpen, because that's the big thing for the New York Mets, right? They have a plethora. What's that?
The good old arm barn, baby. Let's do it.
Yes, they have a plethora of guys that are either going to be staying or leaving here. And regardless on what happens here, you'd have to imagine that the Mets are going to really be strategic on pretty much bringing in a decent amount of new arms, because in my humble opinion, and I'll start, you have Trevor Williams, Seth Lugo, Adam Ottavino, Michael Givens, and Trevor May. I only think one of those players is going to return to the Mets next season. That might be a bold take. And again, it's not that I want these players to go, but out of all of them, it's the one player that I know Anthony Recker is going to disagree with, that being an Adam Ottavino. Ottavino, while his market value is high, he's someone that I can certainly see taking a pay cut to stay in Queens. Grew up a Mets fan, loved his time with the Mets, and he's someone that you can tell that the Mets would love to have him back, as given how much of a certainty he was in that setup role for the majority of the season. And I'm curious to see your guys' takes on that. And Trevor Williams, someone who I think is the top priority of the bullpen, arguably is someone who I think is going to be parted with, mainly because of the fact that he's going to have the ability to go elsewhere and potentially be more so of a starter. He's going to get a nice overpay, in my opinion, for how great he was in that flex role for the Mets as a starter and a reliever. He was perfect since they acquired him at the 2021 trade deadline, eating those innings, those key innings. And while the Mets definitely can use him back, they also have some internal options that they can use also, and maybe guys coming out of the farm to kind of fill that role without it hurting them too much. Then you get on to Trevor May, Seth Lugo, Michael Givens. Out of those, Trevor May is someone where I feel that the Mets may have just come to an end when it comes to him. He dealt with a lot of ailments this past year. He's someone that, market value-wise won't be crazy, so that could benefit the Mets in bringing him back. But Seth Lugo is someone that, being a longtime New York Met, of course, I'm sure he would like to stay here, but I could also see him benefiting from a change of scenery. Let's not forget, Seth Lugo really labored the first half of the 2022 season, picked it up quite a bit in the second half. However, the home run rate was a little bit up, though, and he just feels like a guy, in my opinion, that, again, can get a nice overpay elsewhere. As critical and as crucial as he has been for the Mets over the years, doing everything that they've asked him, from being a starter to a spot starter to a normal reliever, I don't know why. I just have this hunch that I think he's going to go elsewhere. And then you get on to the Michael Givens of the world. He's someone that I think that the Mets, if they want to bring him back, okay, that's fine. But given the fact that they only saw a small sample size of him post-trade deadline, it wouldn't be surprising if he's parted with as well. So starting with you, Joe, let's go to you. What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts on these relievers? It's okay if you disagree. Again, I'm filled with hot takes right now. I don't know. I'm not certain about this bullpen. I really think that they're going to mix it up quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean,
and Joely Rodriguez too. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
Yeah.
Let's leave him off the list. Have a good life, Joely. Good riddance. How you doing? Keep it moving. I think Givens is gone of the 5 that you just mentioned. Ravens 26-6. Told you that was a lot.
Yeah, everyone's been mocking you in the chat.
Yeah,
saying,
I know. They say
Joe's watching the game.
Hey, you know what? Got a couple of units on him. I think Givens is gone, and the other 4, I mean, you could make an argument for all of them.
Yep.
Trevor Williams may have priced himself out. Not that the Mets can't afford him, but at some point, Cohen's going to spend like a madman. But you also have to kind of pick and choose your spots. And Trevor Williams, Rec, what you were saying about Zach Eflin before, if he can be that go-between guy and maybe get 10 mil a year, I don't think the Mets are going to pay more than maybe 5-6 mil a year for Williams to return. I don't know. It depends how much they want to look at, like Rafael Montero. Now, regular season, I would have said he might be a priority, and that might mean Ottavino or Lugo could be out the door. Montero kind of stunk in the World Series, so I don't know if they're going to still look to him. I feel like those are all kind of like setup guys, in the traditional sense of the term. Guys who make a little more money. There's been rumors about the Mets looking at Robert Suarez from San Diego, David Robertson from Philly. So that I think would more directly affect Lugo and Ottavino. The guy who I actually think there's a good chance comes back on a very team-friendly deal is Trevor May. I think Trevor May needs a prove-it deal, maybe a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal with an opt-out. But he was hurt a lot this year, was stunk before the injury, came back, was shaky a couple times after his return. And then I thought Trevor May looked absolutely great down the stretch. He ate some really important innings, tried to keep him in the game down in Atlanta when we got swept at the end of the year. I think Trevor May out of those 5 actually would be the most likely to return on a team-friendly prove-it deal. Past him, I don't even know how to rank them in terms of importance. Trevor Williams versus Lugo. I think they're both very important for different reasons. But I think Trevor May, shockingly, might be the most likely of those 5 to stay.
Okay. And did you touch on the likes of Lugo and Ottavino on where you think what's going to happen?
I think it depends, if they're going to look at Suarez, Robertson, Montero.
Oh, okay.
Those guys are all
you.
going to be in a similar price range, right? They're all kind of like 7th, 8th inning, late inning guys. So I don't even know. Ottavino, maybe you get a discount because he grew up a Mets fan. I don't know how much that really matters once these guys make it to the big leagues. I've seen that he's going to get a 2-year deal for 20 mil. I wouldn't give him that,
No, I wouldn't give him that either. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Guys, Ottavino's going to be 37 in 15 days.
Yeah,
okay?
give him one year for 5.
No, he's going to get overpaid because his stats were better. His traditional stats were better than some of his underlying stats. So someone's going to pay him a little bit more money than he's worth. And at 37, by the time the season starts next year, I'm good. See you later. Trevor May, I agree with you, actually, Joe. I think he can come back. Him and Jeremy are tight from their days in Minnesota together. Jeremy was a coach over there. Trevor, obviously, that's the reason Trevor came over here. That relationship, I think that continues. And again, he's had some injury problems and some underperformance in the last 2 years. So at times, so realistically, I think you can bring him back on a team-friendly deal. He doesn't have to be an 8th inning guy. He can be, just a guy in your bullpen, and that's fine. Michael Gibbons gone, Joe Ellie gone. Trying to think who else did we talk? Oh, Trevor Williams. I like Trevor Williams. I think honestly, I think the Mets really value him, so I think there's a chance he comes back. I don't think they pay him anywhere near $10 million a year. I think it's more along the lines of like a $5-6 million, for a year or two, whatever, not a big deal. And I loved him when I faced him back in 2016, coming up with the Pirates. I thought it was filthy. And that back then he was throwing 94, 96, sinkers, cutters, curveballs, sliders, changeup. He was nasty. Anyway, and then outside of that, Seth Lugo, that's the one where I'm just really not sure. I don't know which way this goes, mostly because Seth is a different cat. I mean, he's a different guy. When I caught him, he was a starter. He wanted to be a starter. He's wanted to be a starter his entire career. The fact that he's in the pen, I don't know. I haven't talked to him at all in the last couple of years. I don't know if he is still wanting to be a starter. I really don't know where Seth sits on this, but as of a year or two ago, he still wanted to be a starter.
Yep.
So even though he had so much success in the bullpen, so I don't know where that lands. He's had a lot of success here. Obviously, he was one of the best relievers in the game for a year or two there with the Mets. It's just going to be really what he wants to do, because I think the Mets would welcome him back. I don't know why you wouldn't. With some of the spin rates and some of the other things that he has going for him, I think there are teams out there that are going to pay him a lot of money to come in and be a reliever. And that ultimately probably sends him somewhere else.
Yeah, I think the big key, like any other years, free agency when it comes to these overpays, right? And the Mets having these big name free agents internally before they really even get to these guys in the bullpen. You know, you still have Nimmo, you still have deGrom, Bassitt, Walker, Carrasco to a lesser degree. Like they're going to have to shell out a lot of dough before they can really even start to, in my opinion, focus completely on the bullpen and bring a lot of these guys back. And that's why I think that to an extent, they're going to really mix things up. There's some names out there that, from a fan's perspective, I love. I know that one guy we'll talk about further. You've spoken off air about him wrecking Andrew Chafin, did opt out of a $6.5 million deal with the Tigers. He's someone that I think would be a great fit for the Mets. I've been preaching this for almost 2 years now, so I hope it finally happens biasly. But there's a lot of relievers out there that can be great fits for the Mets that are currently not in the organization. So a great discussion here regarding the relievers. Now let's pan to the starters. And let's start with Carlos Carrasco, because Cookie, in my opinion, is going to come back because he has a vesting option on his contract. Now, when I was looking up through Spotrac here on the internet, it didn't really show me if that vesting option is still there for him, because it feels like it's a great chance he's going to return on that money. Assuming that that is still an option for the Mets, I feel like he's almost a lock to return solely based on.
He didn't hit the vesting option. I
Oh,
want to say
that's why.
100.
Gotcha.
I want
Okay.
to say it was 130 or 140 innings. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Okay. I think he may have a team option then. There's something there going on with Cookie. I don't think he's just a normal free agent. And for that reason, I think that you pretty much have to bring him back, knowing how much uncertainty you have for the rest of the rotation. Now, would I prefer Cookie personally over Taijuan Walker and or Chris Bassitt? No, of course not. I would be foolish to say that personally. But I do think that he's someone that is, of course, going to be on the cheaper side in comparison to the others. And, of course, would bring you that certainty, at least for the back half of the rotation, to see what he can bring for at minimum another year. So, Joe, starting with you, what's your thoughts on Cookie's future?
It's interesting because of all these options, right? I'll try to keep this one short and sweet. If you
Hold on, guys. Hold on. I have that he is an unrestricted free agent for 2023. Just so you know.
Oh, so there's no. All right, because I thought there was a $14 million option.
There was. It vests with 170 plus health innings plus healthy to start 23, but he did not get there. So there is a $3 million buyout. The Mets pay him $3 million, and he is an unrestricted free agent.
Interesting. I mean, I still could see him back. You know, I think he's got. I think he's a great veteran. I think he's got a good relationship with Lindor. I think he's settled into New York nicely this year. Look, at the end of the day, he's a number 4 or number 5 starter. And if your 4th or 5th guy can win 15 games with an ERA of 4 in today's, era of baseball, that's worth the money
Bartolo
Eflin turned
Colon.
down.
Bartolo Colon 2.0.
Yeah. I mean, that's worth the money that Eflin just turned down. I'd give Cookie 14, 15 a year. I'd prefer a 1-year deal. I don't know if he'd do that. You'd probably have to give him like 2 for 28, 2 for 30. But not a bad 4th or 5th guy. And if I saw more from Tyler McGill as a starter last year, maybe I'd be more free to let a guy like Cookie walk. But at the end of the day, Cookie 8 innings. McGill is such a big question mark that, right now your only 2 certainties are Scherzer and David Peterson. So maybe Cookie in that 4th or 5th spot is worth 15 mil.
What about you, Rick?
I mean, have you guys seen the starting pitcher market? It's not fantastic. Like,
it's top heavy.
Outside there's a couple up there, Carlos Rodon, Martin Perez had a great year. I don't know that I trust him and paying him as much as he might get. Tyler Anderson had a great year. Not going to say that I trust him. There's just Jose Quintana, I like him, but I don't love him to maybe how much he's going to get paid. So there's just not a whole lot out there that I'm in love with. Clayton Kershaw, he's not going to come here and be a Met. It's not going to happen. I don't know.
I think there's going to be a reluctance for the Mets when it comes to any guy that's thrown a contract. I really don't see a role where the Mets are going to want to target many guys that have a compensation pick tied with them as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, and they're going to be putting a lot of qualifying offers out there on guys like deGrom and Bassitt and Walker, and there's going to be a lot of those too. I'd imagine we're going to find out in a couple of days. So, it's to me, I think the Mets have a lot of work to do. This roster is gonna. We said this, weeks ago that this roster is going to look very different. Right after they lost to the Padres, we were talking about this roster is going to look very different next year. I think they bring back a few guys but I really think they make a lot of changes. And what they need to do is somehow find out and have internal discussions about how much did they trust some of these young guys and giving them any role in the coming season. Or do you just go out and pay for a team? And if those guys force their way up, or if injuries force them up, you let it happen, which I think is probably more along the lines of what they'll do. So I expect to see the Mets very active in free agency.
Absolutely. And Taijuan Walker is an interesting one because he came off of a far better season than his first year out. Finally a full year where he was able to stay healthy for the most part, dealing with that workload better. Yes, he wasn't the best pitcher in the second half like he really was in the first half for both years in Queens. However, he definitely handled himself better and was a far better pitcher down the stretch than Cookie Carrasco too in the crunch time. And that was something that I made note of a lot when evaluating Taijuan and his ability down the stretch of this Mets rotation. He, of course, denied his $6 million player option. He's a free agent. I think Taijuan is unfortunately as good as gone, mainly because of the fact that, again, I could see a team really overpaying him, upwards of a 5-year deal. So, Joe, starting with you, what's your thoughts on the future of Taijuan Walker?
Yeah, this might hurt because I love Taijuan Walker. I mean, this guy stepped up. He was so important when deGrom was on the shelf, when Scherzer went out for 6 weeks in the first half. I mean, Ty was the Mets' best starting pitcher in the first half last year. Not necessarily, when Scherzer was out there, he was their best pitcher, but, availability is the best ability. And Ty was out there and he shoved. He should have been an all-star based on his first half last year. This hurts because I just don't know, as someone who's been told by several people throughout his life, he's got commitment issues. I just don't know if I'm ready to commit to 5 years of Ty. I love Ty. I'd love Ty for a 2-year deal.
That was slick. I like
it. I don't think this one's about the money. I think it's about the years. And I think another team that's a little more desperate than the Mets might be willing to give Ty 4+ years. Whereas, I'd love him on a 2-year, $36 million contract. He would take less of an AAV for a 4 or 5 year deal, understandably so. So yeah, I just don't think the two sides are going to be in agreement. And that sucks because I really love Ty Walker, but I think
Me too.
I'm gonna say Ty. I think there's a good chance he stays.
Okay.
Basically because of what I just mentioned about the rest of the market. There's not a ton out there, and yes, he's going to get offers, but I do think the Mets will be willing to go 3 to 4 years for him. They had a reluctancy to sign him 2 years ago, and I was on SNY at the time before the end of free agency going, Taijuan Walker, guys, Taijuan Walker. Like, this kid, if he can stay healthy, he's going to be good. And of course, he went out and shoved that first half. He had a rough second half. He was coming off of basically 3 years of injury. So this year he comes out and shows a much better base, and he gives you innings throughout the entire year, and he looked good most of the year. Yeah, there's a couple starts here and there, but man, this guy was really consistent for them this year. And again, he stayed healthy. He went out there, gave innings. I love this kid. I think he can do. He does a lot, and I think he likes the bright lights. I think he likes New York a lot. I thought he really grew this year in particular, not just on the mound, but off too. I mean, he seemed like he had a different presence about him. In that clubhouse, and whether the Scherzer has something to do with that, or Buck, or whoever, I really like the guy he became, and I think they, as an organization, are going to appreciate that and bring him back.
I don't want to see Ty's tacos gone. I mean, come on, this guy was electric. I really do enjoy Taijuan Walker, not just as a player, but as a person. I would love to see him return. I personally, again, think that's on the outside looking in, but by all means, if it does in fact happen where he returns the Mets, I'll be very happy as a fan. And the reason why I think Taijuan Walker is not going to return in part is because there's a couple stars in front of him, obviously. And Chris Bassitt is an interesting one. Bassitt had a very solid season for the New York Mets. Now down the stretch, especially in the big games against those Braves, against the Padres, he didn't show up nearly to the liking that we were hoping as fans. But he's going to be looking for probably between a 3 or 4 year deal. He's at the age of 33 already. So he wants a multi-year deal. It makes sense. And something about me feels that the Mets have Chris Bassitt towards the top of their priority list, well over Taijuan Walker. Now, of course, I could be wrong in saying that, but I think the Mets saw a good amount from Bassitt. We heard Mark Hanna come out recently and state with the New York Post that he believes that Bassitt will return, similar for why, again, Hanna loves New York so much. Two guys coming from Oakland, a small market to a big market, and just enjoying every single second of being with this organization. So I think as long as the Mets have a decent level of interest, Bassitt will in fact return. But of course, things could get dicey as he is one of the better starters out there on this market. It is top heavy. So starting with you, Joe, what do you think the future of Bassitt holds?
This is interesting. I mean, Bassitt, he's got what it takes. You know, excuse the expression, he's got the balls to play in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, you need that to play in New York. And he's got that. He's a tough competitor. Yes, he came up short against Atlanta and San Diego. The whole team did. I don't want to hear about that. Bassitt was there, you know, much like I spoke about Ty Walker. He was there when other guys, you know, weren't available. Bassitt was, and especially he went through that rough patch in like late May and June, second half of the year. He was absolute nails. You know, another team just might throw a bag at him and make it tough for him to stay. I think he wants to be a Met. I think the Mets want him back. I think if deGrom leaves, Bassitt's definitely back. I think if the Mets pay deGrom, it's a toss-up. I would say if deGrom leaves, there's a 98% chance Bassitt returns. If deGrom stays, I would say that's down to like a 40% chance. So okay. I think the money that they throw at Jake matters a lot here because someone's going to throw a lot of money at Bassitt. So I don't know if it'll be us or someone else, but I think you have to watch to see what happens with Jake first.
I got Bassitt moving on. I really like him. I loved him when he came over. I loved him as an A. I think the organization loves him. But again, he's the type of guy that he's going to fit in anywhere. And people are going to love him, and someone's going to pay him money, a lot of money. And, you know, no, he's not a number one, but he's really good, and he's got the right attitude. And, yeah, I don't know. I would love to see him stay. It's just one of these guys. I just feel like there's going to be too much interest in him, and he's going to end up somewhere else.
See, for me, I would almost argue, Joe, that especially in the scenario where, say, the Mets bring Jake back before having a decision on Bassitt, which kind of feels far-fetched, I think Jake might really take a little bit to find out his decision. But let's say hypothetically for a minute that Jake signs, you know, with the Mets. I think that there's still a very strong likelihood that Bassitt returns because I really think that the Mets enjoy what they have going there between Jake, Max, and Bassitt. That relationship feels really tight. And I think the Mets, not only them, but the players alike would like to run things back in that sense because, again, Jake was out for a good portion of the year. He wasn't able to necessarily be there and build that relationship from the get-go with Max and Bassitt alike. But you saw right away that as soon as those guys were healthy in the rotation together, they were just nitpicking everything. They were sharing insight in the dugout, whoever was starting, Bassitt, Craig, Scherzer, and Jake alike, with so many things throughout the season after having strong starts. So I think that's something that will come into play to a degree when it comes to Bassitt returning to the Mets potentially, especially in that scenario where Jake returns. And speaking about the simple man himself, Jacob deGrom is that guy where, you know, it's so tough to figure out what his future is going to hold. Again, we see these comments from Canna and Rec. I actually want to ask your opinion on this because I wonder, did Jake give potentially the okay to Canna to say this publicly? Because, you know, we hear from Canna's mouth himself that he's spoken to Jake, and Jake says how much, you know, he very much so would like to return. He loves it here. He loves playing for the Mets and everything. Do you think that that has more substance, especially than, say, what we would hear from a normal report, or, of course, from the rumblings that began this mid-season, making Mets fans believe that Jake was a certainty to go to the Braves because everyone's favorite Mets reporter and Buster only came out with that article? So let me hear it from you, Rec. What's your thoughts on all that?
I mean, I think Canna saying it, obviously it carries more weight because he's his teammate. That said, I don't know that I've met many players who are stupid enough to say to a teammate or anybody, I hate it here. Why would I want to be here? I want to leave. I just, Jake's too smart to do something like that. That doesn't mean that he didn't say it, and that doesn't mean he didn't mean it. But we saw what happened last year with Freddie Freeman. Nobody thought he was leaving Atlanta. Nobody thought it could ever happen. He's in LA playing for the Dodgers. Now that was more team driven than Freddie, obviously, but things happen. Like weird things happen in the off season and free agency. Um, if someone's going to pay Jake 40 plus million a year, I don't take the Mets off the board, but I do, and this is the same argument I made about Scherzer last year. I'd rather pay two guys $23-24 million who are really good, really good. Now, there's not that many starters out there, so bear in mind, it's a small list. But I'd rather pay two guys that much money than one guy $45 million. Simply because you have numbers on your side. At the end of the year, if that one guy is hurt for $45 million, you got nothing for that $45 million. Odds are at least one of those guys making 24 mil is going to be healthy. So there's a part of me that thinks the Mets might be smart enough to say, okay, maybe we're better off spreading this out a little bit. You still need an ace. You still need number one. Do they feel they have that in Scherzer? And do they feel that he's going to be that at the end of the year, every year for the next couple of years? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe not. He's getting older too. Maybe that compels them to spend the money on Jake, and that's okay. Jake's the best pitcher on the planet. No one's going to argue that he shouldn't be here, that you shouldn't pay him the money.
You'd be surprised, sadly.
Well, but look, I just get a little bit conflicted here because I want to see Jake back. I think Jake should come back. I think the Mets should bring Jake back, but there's just a part of me that thinks it's just not the right move. I don't know why. I guess I've kind of tried to articulate it, but realistically, it's a really tough ask to give one starter $43 million, another starter $45 million, knowing that there's a good chance that, they both could have injury issues. One's going to be 39, and the other one is coming off of a couple years of just having injury issues. That's tough to hang your season on that because that's what the Mets would be doing. They'd be hanging their entire year, their entire championship hopes on that again. And so it just becomes a difficult pill for me to swallow to say, yeah, bring him back. It makes makes all the sense in the world because there's part of it that doesn't.
Rec, if I asked you right now if you'd rather have Jacob deGrom back next year or Carlos Rodon and Chris Bassitt, what would your pick be?
Rodon and Bassitt. Yeah. I think Rodon's upside. Look, he's got some injury history himself, but did you see what he did last year in San Francisco?
Yeah, he was pretty damn good.
Talk about
a proven. By the way, a walking K-prop over.
And he was one of those guys that I was saying last year, why not go out and get Rodon? And I was saying Gausman or Ray or like there was several guys that it was like, these guys are getting 24, 25 million. Sign two of those. Don't sign Scherzer. Sign two of those. Like, why not? I like me some Rodon. I think he's going to be 30 million this year.
Really?
Yeah. He was that good last year, and he was really good the year before. So you're starting to put together a record there. I think that raises the price. Plus, he's the best starter on the market. So I think you're looking at 30 or north of 30 for him, per year. And then Bassitt. Bassitt's a beast. Why would you not want to have him? If I can get those two for, let's say, 50 mil instead of deGrom for 45, I think I would take those two. I really do.
It's a tough argument. How many?
It's don't get me wrong. Like I would I would love to say keep deGrom, but I just really there's a part of me that's just saying like, yeah, I'd rather have the two guys.
And at the end of the day, if you keep Jake, right, who's going to be your fifth starter? Are you going to get more wins from Rodon and Bassitt combined? Are those guys going to combine give you 30 wins versus Jake and McGill combined giving you 20? You have to weigh that. You have to weigh that.
So, Joe, for you, what do you think the future holds for deGrom. I know this is a really difficult conversation because, like, again, you saw I came out over this past week with a video on 5 Mets who won't return. Had deGrom on the thumbnail, explained right away that I do not want to see Jake go, and I pray that this is a jinx where I can change things because this is a guy that I absolutely want to see return. However, there is, again, some rightful criticism as to why he may not return. So for you, where do you find yourself leaning anywhere, if at all?
I mean, just like anyone, I want him back. I would say with Jake, I'm so torn. I would say that there's not thinking what I want, thinking what will happen. 60% chance he's back. I don't think we're going to lose him to Atlanta. I just don't. I don't think Steve Cohen will allow that to happen. I think if we're going to lose him to anyone, it's going to be Texas, and they're going to pay him a ridiculous amount of money. And he's going to be a really good pitcher, but I don't think he's going to be Jake in Texas. I mean, that's a ballpark where the ball just flies. We've seen Jake have one of the worst starts of his career in Texas. I think the Rangers are the only team we would lose him to. I don't think we lose him to the Braves. I mean, the Braves also, they don't really pay guys a whole lot. Matt Olson, I mean, is like the only guy that they've really broken the bank for.
Be wary of them, though. They're definitely going to be spending this offseason.
They're not going to outspend Steve.
They're not going to outspend Steve, I agree. But I'm just saying, don't be surprised if
You're
the
talking
Braves...
about the Rangers?
No, the Braves.
No. Don't be
Braves.
surprised if the Braves make some really nice moves this offseason because them having all these team-friendly contracts gives them that luxury to do exactly that now.
And you got to remember, though, guys, they don't have to spend as much as Steve.
Yeah.
If deGrom gets, I don't know, 5 years, what would that be? Close to $200 million, maybe more than $200 million in New York. If he got 5 years and $175 million in Atlanta, or obviously Texas, where there's no state tax, that's the same money. Like, it's the same thing. So they don't have to spend as much on the books. That's the way I see it.
Do you think he's going to get 5 years? Because I think he's a 3 to 4 year deal guy.
If there's a bidding war on Jacob deGrom,
he'll get a 5th year.
If he's going to get 5, it's going to be in Texas. Yeah. It feels like that's like the only way, right? How else could that happen? But yeah, I think my final thoughts are again on Jake from a fan perspective. No chance in hell I want him to see anywhere else. I want this guy to retire New York Met. We all know famously Jake in many interviews over the year has said how awesome it would be to, stay with one team his entire career because it doesn't happen often. That's something that he would definitely like to see happen. So I truly pray that things work out and we see some breaking news to discuss that Jake returns on a deal that, again, for me, the only natural concern I would have is, okay, if you bring Jake back on, say, upwards of 40 mil per season on average, which is definitely going to happen wherever he lands, how is that going to impact things going further? Just how deep a pocket is Steve Cohen going to have this offseason specifically? He's going to go past 300 million. The question is how far, and by all means, I have all the trust in the world with Steve and his capabilities, but I'm just excited and also anxious to see just how far he's going to go, because at some point there is going to be a point where you're saying, okay, now we really need to dial it back. Or maybe the Mets are going to get very creative with trades too, which very well can happen. A lot of options for the Mets this offseason, but Jacob deGrom is that huge wild card. And it's funny that you said, Joe, you think 60% chance he comes back. I think 55%. That's actually what I've been running in my head all day. So very similar there. But with that being said, that does it for the Mets free agents. We will, of course, discuss them further at length with any breaking news and rumors that comes out with them throughout the offseason. But before we wrap things up, let's give a quick mention of going on with the Manager of the Year finalists, Joe. Take it away.
Yeah, all the award finalists, 3 for each award.
Oh, you did not just get your audio all shitty on us in the last second. Unplug and replug. This guy, we're 58 minutes in. You're doing great. Come on. Take it home, baby. Let's do this.
Am I back? Am I back?
Yes.
All right. Perfect. Manager of the Year award finalists are out. Buck Showalter, Brian Snicker, Dave Roberts. Guys, let's keep it short and sweet. My pick is Buck. Not being biased there. The Mets win total over under was 88.5 coming into the season. They won 101. They were in first place for all but 5 days. The Braves just won the World Series. They had high expectations. Dodgers win total over under every year is right around 100. They have high expectations. I think Buck's the guy.
Rack?
I'm going to say it's Snitker again.
Because
Sorry,
the division,
guys.
is that what it comes down to?
Where's your shirt?
You can get mad at me all you want, but who won the division? Like, I don't know. I mean, that team started out terrible. He had a meeting with the team. They turned it around. Look, I'm not going to say Buck doesn't deserve it. Buck is a fantastic manager. He did a great job with this team. They were super consistent. I'm just thinking. I'm thinking like the writers. Like I'm thinking. It's not about what I think. It's about what they're going to vote. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm saying
Can we
I really
quote
feel
that?
like it's going to be Snicker.
Imagine Anthony Recker, the MLB player, thinking like the writers for a change. We
Yeah.
really turned. My goodness gracious.
I talk to them a lot. I know how they think, guys.
I know. Yeah, I'm biasedly going with Buck.
I feel like the writers
Unbiasedly.
love Buck, though. I feel like the writers do love Buck.
Do you feel like the writers love Buck?
I feel like the writers
Get your
love Buck.
audio,
I mean, look,
fixed, kid.
We're mocking the audio, Joe.
Get this guy out of here.
All right.
In the AL, it better be Scott's service.
I think that does it. I think that does it. So, guys, make sure to stay tuned for more podcasts at minimum once a week. There will definitely be some breaking news topics for as long as our schedules align right. Then we'll be discussing them as well for you guys on live shows on YouTube and, of course, audio wherever you get your audio podcasts. But that does it for episode 31 of Bleav in Queens. Please make sure to check out Anthony Recker on MLB Tonight for the MLB Network. As always, Anthony_Recker on all your socials. And also for Joe Sorrell, make sure to check him out at Sorrell Sports Talk. Joe, do you have any big podcasts coming up that you'd like to share quick, or is your audio still shit? No, he's not even plugged in. He's like, forget it. I'm out of here. And with that being said, that'll do it for us, guys. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We will catch you guys all again real soon. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.